Okay, so thank you so much for joining us for anybody who's watching this. So I guess just getting started before we get into any of the questions that anybody might have, do you guys want to just go ahead and introduce yourself? So just share, I guess, your name, your program, and one fun fact about yourself or anything else you might want to share.
Shaan, would you like to go first?
Sure. So hi everyone, my name is Shaan, and I do have to first start by saying that I am one of the panelists, even though I don't have the background. I don't have the processing capability on my computer to actually display the background, but I'm here. I am in the BIE program at UBC, the Bachelor of International Economics, and I'm in the class of 2024, so I'm about to go into my second year when I fly out this weekend. And one fun fact about me, probably is one of the weirder ones, is this tooth right here is actually a trip in grade 5. So there's a little fun fact about me. Emma, pass it off to you.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. For those who are watching the recording, my name is Emma, and I'm going into my second year at U of T, the Scarborough campus, and I'm studying psychology, more specifically mental health studies. Yeah, I guess a cool fun fact about me is that I have a triangle nail. So when I was younger, my parents accidentally slammed the door on my finger from the car. So I don't know if you could see it, but it's kind of like shaped like a triangle. So whenever I get my nails done, the ladies find it like super weird. So fun fact about me, I guess.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay, yeah, so I see some people have joined. So if you have any questions or anything that you want to ask, you can feel free to just unmute yourself, type it in chat, whatever you feel most comfortable with. But yeah, if not, I guess I can just get it started because we have some questions prepared for you guys, and Rodney or anyone else, if you want to interject, you can feel free to do so at any time. But I guess just starting off, why did you choose your specific program and school?
Emma, you go first this time.
So actually, it was in my last year of high school when I actually realized that I wanted to go into psychology, which was like a completely like 180, because I originally wanted to go into business. But towards the end of high school, I realized that it wasn't necessarily something that I wanted to do. And I found for me personally that this career path was more fulfilling, and I think it really fit my personality. So that's why I decided to go into psychology, more specifically mental health, because it's a really personal issue to me. And so I've always advocated for it. So I thought, kind of just lined up, and I just wanted to go into it. As for the school that I wanted to go with, fun fact, I also considered UBC, Shaan. So I could have been there, but I'm not. But I think U of T has like a huge community, a huge network. So I thought that was a really good thing. Also, they're really well known for their research, and that's something that I've been considering. So at the end of the day, I chose U of T. More specifically, the Scarborough campus, because it's the only program that has a specialization in mental health. So that's me. Shaan?
Yeah, so I'll start with the university first. The big 5 universities that I was considering were McGill, Queens, Western, U of T, UBC. And why I chose UBC was for, I guess, 3 primary reasons. The first was the city. I love Vancouver. I wanted a completely different experience from Toronto, from high school. And truthfully, being in Vancouver, or after having been in Vancouver for 1 year, it feels like a completely different country almost. Like just the everything is so different about it. And I love the opportunity to start fresh and build myself up again. I also really, well, another factor for me was the athletics program. I'm on the varsity cross country and track and field program or team at UBC. And immediately I connected with the coach very well. Really loved the goals that they had set over kind of the length of my degree there, and I was really interested from day one to contribute. And then academically, my favorite class in economics my favorite class in high school was economics, followed by math. And so there's this really niche program called the Bachelor of International Economics program that really I don't think was matched at any of the other schools that I was interested in. It was just a very niche program, takes 100 people a year, 50 international, 50 domestic, and it just combined my interest for economics, my goal of someday working in at the Bank of Canada or in, as a finance minister or something like that. I really want to use my knowledge in the field to do something for our country, as well as the opportunity to meet people from all over the world. I think that can't be forgotten on us. Like, that's a really beautiful opportunity. I think, it's not ever easier than in first year university to meet people from all over the world. So just kind of checked off all of the boxes for me, and it was really a no-brainer after that.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. It's really great hearing about all of your interests and passions. So I guess on that note, I know that humanities in general can be quite broad in terms of the different options that you can have after graduation and what you can really use your degree for. So do either of you kind of have any idea for what type of career you might want to pursue? I know that both of you kind of talked a little bit about it in the last question, but do you want to elaborate in terms of like what types of opportunities you might be looking for or what you really want to pursue long term?
Sure, I guess I could go first. Originally, I always wanted to go into counseling, leaving high school and starting university. However, like once I started my program, I noticed that there were a lot of research opportunities and classes that I've been taking. So that's actually another interest of mine. I'm actually currently a research assistant for the Faculty of Social Work at U of T. So that's really been a lot of fun learning new things. So I guess my current thoughts on my future career path, I think I want to find sort of like the intersection of counseling and research. So right now, tentatively, my plan is grad school, but I think that's always subject to change. Shaan?
Yeah, my plan is sort of similar. I'm looking at doing grad school. I want to complete my master's in economics after this degree, and then I want to enter the field of finance and kind of work my way through, get a little bit of private sector experience as well as a little bit of experience in government, potentially, the intersection of government and finance. And then hopefully I will get the chance to do a law degree a little bit later, and then work my way into politics. That's my big game plan right now.
Yeah, that sounds really awesome. Very exciting for both of you. So I guess in terms of like programs, do you guys have like any advice for people who might want to apply to humanities programs in general, as well as like what was the application process kind of more specifically for the program that you're currently in, as well as any other programs that you potentially applied to?
I've got a few thoughts on that. First, I will say, when it comes to the humanities, Em and I were talking about this actually just before we started recording. When it comes to the humanities, I think really, really look internally as opposed to externally when you're making your decision to go into the humanities. And the other part to that is have a vision. I always think that those that go into any field with a vision will be successful. And that vision, I think the humanities is a beautiful place for that vision to change and for you to not have to completely change your life around for that vision to change. It changes quite naturally, and that's a normal thing. But as long as you have a vision kind of pushing you forward in a direction that leads you to purpose, to a job, to all those sorts of things, you're going to be okay. Like my whole thing is especially in the humanities, it can be very easy to get overwhelmed by all the offerings that are available at all these massive faculties. But to always keep trying, to always keep your vision in the back of your mind is a very important thing, just as a general thing when either considering that as a major of choice or working your way through that major. And now specific to the application process, I mean, UBC's for the Bachelor of International Economics program was actually, I think, the same as just the general arts one, which was just the personal profile. There was no video interview. There was no supplementary essay. It was just your personal profile. And actually, if you've applied to UBC, you'll also know that if you apply by December 1st, you're automatically considered for awards. So I was actually very grateful to receive one of the presidential scholarships there, and just kind of happened after I was already ready to commit. So it was a really great thing. My advice to students interested in UBC in particular is really take time on just your personal profile, like the 3 fundamental essays that you have to write, because that you don't know how far that will carry you, especially at UBC. I think other universities do a better job of catering individual scholarships and awards applications to that particular award. UBC kind of considers it on a macro scale and just fits you with what they think is best. So UBC, that would be my advice. I can give some thoughts on other universities, but now that it's been a year, I'm not as fresh, so might leave. Well, for certain, Emma has a better idea of how U of T's system works, so I'll pass it off to her now.
Thank you, Shaan. I think exactly what Shaan said was pretty comprehensive, so I don't know if I'm going to add that much. But overall, yeah, I'm just going to echo off of what a lot of what Shaan said. I think going into university with at least a sort of vision of what you want to do, knowing your strengths, taking the time to sort of get to know yourself and what you're good at and what you want to do is really important before sort of deciding what you want to go into. But I will say, because humanities is extremely broad, I don't think you should necessarily like limit yourself to perhaps your major. I know a lot of people that like switch majors after their first year who want a minor in completely different things. And I think that's totally acceptable and actually preferable. But overall, I guess sort of having an idea of what you want to do, but at the same time, trying to dip your toes in different things is really important when deciding what program you want to go into. As for application processes, for all the schools that I applied to, I applied to 4 different schools, and I didn't have any supplementary essays or anything. I kind of just applied, and then that was it for me. I guess I'm very lucky in comparison to my peers who had to do like a lot of interviews and essays and whatnot. But for all the programs that I applied for, whether it was a Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science, I didn't have any supplementary things to submit. So that's it.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. That was really helpful. I know that one of the things that both of you kind of echoed off was that it can be really helpful to kind of have at least somewhat of a vision or idea of what your strengths might be or what you might be interested in pursuing as a career. So for high school students, do you have any kind of advice or any suggestions for like what type of extracurriculars that you might be able to participate in within the humanities to kind of help see if that's something that you might be interested or you might not be, depending on like, I guess what your strengths are and what you're interested in?
That's a very good question. And I actually have a really good answer for that. I think because it helped me. My extracurriculars helped me in finding this path for myself. I did a lot of public speaking oriented things in high school, like speaking at assembly, running clubs, participating in Model UN, et cetera, et cetera. And I think at a point when it came time for me to figure out what I wanted to do, I just stepped back and I realized, you know what? You don't spend so much of your time doing these sorts of things by accident, right? Like you may not explicitly say, I'm doing this for this, and this reason. You just kind of gravitate towards it. It's important to acknowledge that I just really wanted to do those things all throughout high school, and instead of trying to force myself down a path that didn't really accommodate that, I sort of tried imagining that as an end goal. Like, what's an end goal for Model UN, being a diplomat, a politician, that sort of thing. And I thought, wow, that's kind of up my alley. That's really cool. And then I did a little bit more digging into other politicians that I had a lot of a respect or admiration for. And I kind of looked at their career and what sort of things they did. And this, the field of economics kept coming up, people, some just taking bachelors, some even taking up to a PhD in economics to, then move on to a position like governor of the Bank of Canada, right? And these sorts of things. And so I saw economics come up a lot, and I had some conversations with some of those people, and ultimately realized that I think, what I truly do believe now, that is, economics is a very important way to understand the world, especially for those that are in commerce, finance, working in the private sector. I think it's important for everyone to understand, because it takes into account kind of a macro perspective of an entire economy. It doesn't focus on one individual firm, one individual sector, one individual industry. So I think economics is just a great tool to have. And it was also my favorite class in high school. So all those things kind of made that decision relatively easy. But, I will have students know who end up watching this that, while in hindsight, it seems very easy to explain, in the moment, definitely was not the easiest thing. So I'm going to emphasize that too, that like piecing those dots together takes time, and it actually takes you taking a risk and going out there and giving it a shot and seeing if it works or doesn't work. I'm very grateful that it has worked, and I'm very happy on the path that I'm on currently. But I don't think I necessarily would have made as thoughtful of a decision if I hadn't looked at myself and what I liked and my involvements, as carefully.
Again, echoing off of Shaan, I think everything that he says is pretty comprehensive. But overall, like looking into your interests is, I think, a big point, as I brought up earlier. As I mentioned earlier a bit, I actually wanted to originally go into business, but I did notice that most of the extracurriculars and my interests really aligned with sort of social services, mental health awareness, intersectionality, advocacy. Like even most of the books that I read were kind of aligned with that sort of field. So I guess sort of looking into your own interests and recognizing that, can I make something out of this? Can I go to school for something like this? Can I make a career out of this? At the same time, I understand that during high school, it's a really daunting time. At the age of 17, you have to make a decision that might shape your whole life, and that is really scary, right? Yeah, but at the same time, I read a book, I think it was called like Ikigai or something, and it was about finding like your path in life, finding something that you enjoy, something that is sustainable, and something that is sort of adding worth to the world, something like that. So I think really looking internally, seeing what you like and how you can contribute to a bigger picture is really important.
Yeah, that's really insightful in terms, and I'm sure a lot of the people watching this or hearing from you guys are probably going to be helped out a lot in terms of trying to figure out what they want to do and if they're potentially interested in the humanities. I guess shifting more towards kind of what your particular programs are like, how, I guess in general, how rigorous is the workload, and do you think that it's like a very stressful program, and what's the overall kind of like student culture like within your school as well as within your specific program?
Emma, take it away.
Okay, I saw that you unmuted, so I thought that you were gonna go first. But for me, the transition from high school to university was really alarming because I think I got by really easily in high school. It's bad to say, but I don't think I tried too hard. But I guess going into university, I was kind of shocked by the amount of workload and sort of like the demands of the curriculum, and especially my university. I think the culture at sometimes could be a bit toxic, especially when it comes to academic. But overall, I think it's really the support system that you have and the people that you surround yourself with. But overall, I think it was a bit alarming in the beginning, but I've been sort of reviewing the way that I study, reaching out to different sort of resources for help, talking to your profs, talking to TAs, and really like learning how to study for my courses. I think that's been really helpful. But the transition was definitely a bit difficult in the beginning, but it's sort of a matter of sort of grounding yourself in the space that you are in the new environment. Shaan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd agree 100% with that. And I think there's also something very distinct to UBC and U of T in Canada. Like you've got to love what you do academically, and most importantly, have to love academics. Because if either of those things are not, like, if you're not willing to put in the time to grind through your program and you don't enjoy it, or you don't enjoy the work that it takes, honestly, neither of those schools are the place for you. Like, you have to be committed to working hard, to re-examining your study strategies, because it requires all of that, no matter what faculty you're in at these two schools in particular, to succeed. I think. And so, definitely, like I what you were saying about having to reevaluate how you study, certainly. And I worked very, very hard in high school to try and figure that stuff out. And I thought I had it down until day one of class, or that first midterm. And I was like, wow, this is a whole different ballgame. And you have those first few overwhelming moments, but then you kind of you dig down, and you just start breaking it down, and doing what needs to be done in order to get out on the other side. So I definitely would echo that it is a non, like, it's not something you can just assume is going to be okay. I think expect that things are going to be more challenging. You don't have to get nervous. You don't have to stress. It will happen, and not everything will go perfectly. But as long as you're committing to yourself that you're going to see it through, and put in the time to implement these strategies that work for you academically and otherwise, right, to balance the work and the rest of your life, you'll come out on the other end perfectly fine. Better, I think. You'll come out on the end better, a better person. So
Yeah, that's really great. So I guess in terms of like your specific programs for both of you, like what type of courses are you taking and like what do kind of most of your classes look like? So I guess in general, like what does your average day look like? Are you spending a lot of it in classes, or what do those classes look like? Or do you spend a lot of the time studying? I guess in general, do you want to speak about anything just broadly related to that?
I guess I'll go first. I think I could speak sort of for everyone in this year in particularly, because it's a bit different, especially with remote learning and being online and everything. But for me in particular, most of my classes were actually asynchronous, which, has its pros and cons. I watch lectures on my own time, sort of make my own schedule, but at the same time, I found that it could be difficult to stay motivated. For me, I really do like to stick to a schedule, wake up at a certain time, watch my lectures, get my work done. For my classes in particular, I've noticed that you spend more time doing work than actually like being in the lectures. Actually, I got the opportunity to take a lot of electives, especially being first year. I think for my program, it was really very much general. So I got to dip my toes in a lot of different things, especially in humanities, some in science. But overall, the structure, you spend most of your time studying, whether it is preparing for a midterm or test or quiz or writing an essay and doing your assignments. I think most of the time is honestly like on your own diligence to put in the work.
My program was a little bit interesting because I actually now have a smaller class size than I did in high school, right? Like I went from graduating with 156 students to now having 100 kids in my particular cohort. So classes are quite small, which is great. I really like that because I think you get the sort of individualized support that a lot of students in first year usually don't get. And that's the number one thing that they point out is like, I'm in a class with 500 people and I don't know how I can get the help that I need. So luckily don't have to worry about that. I would say, every single one of my classes was asynchronous first year. So in terms of time management, might not be the best person because actually that was a really difficult exercise in order to hold yourself accountable during this past year to doing everything that you would do during a normal school year when you could always press pause on a lecture or do whatever whenever, right? So the only thing I would add probably to like, because I have a pretty regular class schedule, like we have 6 standard timetables this year. We have seven econ courses that are mandatory that are part of our standard timetable, and we've got up to 3 electives we can take. So I don't have a whole lot of flexibility, but yeah, just pretty normal class schedule. The thing that I would like these students to know going into university is the ratio approximately that I would spend in class to working on that particular class. It's about 1 to 2 to 1 to 3 hours, and so aiming to put in about 55-60 hours into school per week during this next year, and I was about around that mark in first year, and I think it helped me succeed academically. But when those hours happened is something I'm kind of not proud of. So we'll learn from that. It's an exercise in personal accountability, but I would emphasize that to students, that if you're willing to commit at least, I'd say 2 hours to prepare for each lecture in advance, for example, then you can contribute and then you stay ahead. And it's just this positive cycle where you build relationships with teachers because you have time to, because you're ahead in the class, because you're asking important questions. I think that's the cycle you want to go down, or that's the path you want to go down, as opposed to I didn't prepare for lecture and then I didn't ask questions because I didn't know what was going on, and then I missed a lecture because I was so behind on everything to catch up on whatever, and then I failed the midterm. You don't want to go down that path, which also happens to far too many students, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in here and add on to what Shaan said. I think it is so important, but at the same time, so hard to stay on track. I've definitely fell victim to falling behind a bit, but sort of what Shaan said, keeping that cycle, it's always better to be over prepared as opposed to under prepared, right? So really putting in the time to understand the lecture and prepare for it is so important in keeping that good and healthy cycle. So thank you for bringing that up, Shaan.
Oh, 100%. Appreciate that.
Yeah, so I know, Shaan, you kind of mentioned partially choosing UBC because of athletics and track and cross country. And Emma, you mentioned in a previous question a little bit about getting involved in research. So just on the note of kind of like extracurriculars and resources and opportunities available in university, would you say that like, I guess like, first of all, like what kind of extracurriculars are really out there when you are in university? And also, like, are there any kind of resources or support systems within your particular program that might help you be able to get like jobs or internships or opportunities or anything like that?
It's a good question. I can go first on this. The tuition for our program, the BIE program, is a little bit, or well, actually, it's the highest domestic tuition out of any program in UBC. So while in the total figure is not ridiculous, especially compared to international fees, it is quite high. And the reason that it is high partially is because that supports individual, like only for BIE students do they get a specialized academic advisor as well as a career advisor. And so that's a huge support that a lot of students rely on and benefit from in order to just have chats about what their interests are, doing well in class, what their career prospects are, et cetera, and kind of from day one, you get that support all throughout your 4 years, and you actually even get that career support 1 year after you graduate, just to make sure you get settled. So that's one feature that I really, really like about the BIE program. I personally have gone a variety of different ways. I'm obviously student first, athlete second, but I have also taken on a position as the president of the Residents Association. So partly because I didn't get the full residence experience last year and I want to relive it through whoever's here this year, and plan some cool events for them while doing that. But also partly because I think it gives an opportunity. There's not a whole lot of opportunities when you're very early into your degree to actually lead something. And so, that gives me an opportunity to explore myself as a leader in this new space, and hopefully enact some meaningful change for the residents in just trying to pass on what I wish truthfully that the previous residents association would have done for us a little bit more, because I think there were opportunities to help us out and they kind of left us high and dry. So I kind of want to I think change that cycle and make sure that students can trust who's in charge, and feel supported by them. And I've also taken on two positions. I'm a financial analyst, so I'm helping out the VP of finance for the Vancouver School of Economics Undergraduate Society, because, as I mentioned before, finance is something I'm interested in. And so I think that's a great way to kind of bridge that gap between finance and economics and see how they connect, what sort of things I would do in a finance role in a club, and just get some experience as well. And then I'm also a technology analyst in Olympus Capital, which has actually now just been changed to Ilios Investments is the new name of the club. And it's I think that's a really cool experience, because it has the same principle as those Sauder or other business school affiliated finance groups where you actually manage money, but it's not exclusive to commerce students. So there's people, who graduated in engineering and they're like, I want to do finance, and people in psychology and people in economics, and they're all just kind of joining together. And, while all these other clubs have done nothing since COVID, they actually started in COVID, and now we've got a team of over 30 analysts, which is really, really cool. So I really like where they're going, and I like the role that I've got there. And I mean, we'll see what happens, but I think that does a good job of, connecting me to all my interests and making me feel connected to the school community, which I think actually, I'll just throw this in. I think at UBC and U of T, another thing that's distinct about those two schools is it has to be led from you in order to connect yourself with the school community. No one's going to sit there and say, oh, Shaan, how are you feeling? How are you? Like, you have to go out and make that effort yourself. And the first step is the hardest, but it will lead to a very purposeful experience, in my opinion.
Yeah, just going off again with what Shaan said, I think what's really important is that you as an individual, when you are looking for these extracurriculars, you have to put yourself out there. Like, our universities have so many resources available, but no one's just going to come up to you and offer it. You really have to put yourself out there to be able to find those. That being said, I believe U of T has about like over 2,000 clubs amongst like the three I know it's crazy, amongst the three campuses. So there are so many opportunities to like put yourself out there and put yourself in a new community. That being said, I believe that when it comes to choosing your extracurriculars, you have to be really selective about where you put your time. I think a lot of people, especially in high school, they like to join as many extracurriculars as possible so you could look good on paper. But I think in actuality, you have to be selective about where you put your time because your time is really precious, and you should be involving yourself in extracurriculars that actually sort of like add value, add substance to your life, that sort of align with your career path, what you want to go into, and things that you actually enjoy. Like Shaan said, he's in like so many different things, but I believe that he actually like cares about it and is very passionate. So that's how, at least for the people that I know, they're able to sustain yourself. So finding things that you really align with, that you enjoy, is really important. What I like especially about U of T is that we have something called the co-curricular learning network. It's sort of a network of different opportunities on campus, off campus, as well as volunteer. We have something called the work study program where you could work while you're taking classes, which is what I'm doing now, which is how I found my research position. So what I really like about the U of T network is how big it is and how broad it is, especially like reaching out to different like alumni and whatnot. It's really easy to do so. How I actually got my research position with my university, I was volunteering for an organization outside of my university, and my supervisor actually connected me with a professor at U of T. So that's kind of how you get the connection. But overall, there are so many resources out there. There's so many different clubs and extracurriculars you could put your time into, but I think you have to be selective about where you sort of put in your time, where you want to show up. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was really great advice from both of you. So I guess like circling a little bit back to what we were talking about before in terms of like choosing your program. I know that Shaan, you briefly mentioned kind of about how international fees tend to be quite expensive, but did either of you like look into potentially options of going to study internationally outside of Canada? And if you did, kind of what made you choose to stay in Canada as opposed to like going anywhere else?
I can do this one pretty quickly. I applied to 8 schools in the US as well. That was the only international um, set of schools that I considered. I the only one that I actually got into was University of Michigan, where they have a phenomenal economics school. The I think the thing that changed my mind was one look at the price tag, to be honest. Like, it's just, in my opinion, I mean, I have plans to do um, many, maybe not many, but at least a couple degrees beyond undergrad. And so I think finishing strong is kind of the lesson that I will put out there. Finish strong, invest in elsewhere, particularly, I guess for me, that would be the US for those degrees, and utilize the magnificent Canadian system that we have now to to ground yourself, to build yourself up, to have those first few failures, those first few successes, and be on that trajectory to do great things in this world by the time you head over to the US. I think, in my opinion, being someone who, and especially for politics as well, you'll see there's a lot of politicians that really utilize the Canadian system. Like, I believe the governor of the Bank of Canada currently, I think, did 3 different degrees in economics, all at Canadian schools. And so I think that says a lot about, like, that says a lot about your trust in the system and your ability to benefit from it. Like, I think it's a great Canadian story. And I think, quite frankly, there's not many reasons why I would consider other schools when they're, it's like, would I pay $400,000 to graduate, or would I pay like 40 or 80, including, all your living expenses? So, yeah, I mean, it really just came down to the cost, as well as this longer term goal, and not wanting to burn out too soon, trying to do something that maybe I wasn't ready for, or maybe I didn't have everything in place financially and otherwise to do right and make the most of it.
Same as Shaan, I think my story is pretty similar. Like I definitely considered going to the US for school, but I really like took a step back and thought about what I wanted. I do love Toronto. I do love like being in Canada. So that was a big factor. And I feel like especially for my future, I would like to continue working in Canada. But yeah, I kind of realized that like everything that I wanted was here, and I feel like Canada, as Shaan said, like the school system is there's a lot of pros in comparison to American schools. And I thought, you know, schools like U of T and UBC are great. You know, you have so many opportunities to really learn here. So I really decided that I do want to stay here. As for grad school, that is another thing that could come up in the future. Potentially, I could go to the US maybe if I get in. I don't know yet, but yeah, then again, I just realized that everything that I wanted was here in my future career path. What I want for myself personally is to stay in Canada for the time being. So that's kind of what I decided.
Yeah, so I think we're getting close to the end. I think breakout rooms are going to close relatively soon. But I guess before we end things off, do you guys have any kind of like general advice or last words for anybody watching, things that I may have missed, or anything that you just want to kind of get out there for students who might be looking to apply to programs or pursue a career in the humanities in the future?
Um, can I go first?
Go for it, Emma.
Really
Go
quick.
for it.
It's really quick.
I'm thinking still.
I think, especially being in high school, as I said earlier, is a really daunting time when you're sort of forced to make this decision that could potentially define the rest of your life and is a very costly costly decision too, right? I personally, like, I struggled a lot, like thinking about what I wanted to do in my future, what program I wanted to go to, what school I wanted to go to. So I understand how scary it could be and how daunting it could really be. But really, I think you have to take a step back and look at what you want for yourself, not what your parents want, not what the world is asking of you, but to really look into your own passions. So I think that is really important. And I think it's okay if you initially go to school for something and you don't end up going into that field in particular, but really looking in what you want to do, I think is the most sustainable choice. So that's kind of what I believe. Shaan?
That's very good advice. I have two things to add to that. Number one is your gut feeling is more accurate than you think it is. And it took me a while to realize that. I kept having this gut feeling. I was trying to force engineering for a while. And I at a point I just thought about it. I thought, you know what, Shaan, it's not about failing out of the program. You could be an okay engineer, but that's not where your heart is. And you've known this for years, and you've been trying to pretend that it doesn't exist. But eventually, it comes time to make the decision, and I think it's important to prioritize what you think and what you feel, because you're going to be the one going, not your parents, not your friends, not anyone you talk to. And so, while it is important to have those conversations, take them with a grain of salt. But I will say, the more conversations you have, the more informed of a perspective you get. You learn you learn something from everyone. I truly do believe that. You can't, I don't think there's a conversation you could have about university where you don't learn one new thing that maybe you didn't know before. And I think the earlier you start having those conversations, the more mature of a perspective you're able to take when it comes time to apply. So have those conversations, don't stress about it. Take those conversations with a grain of salt, and don't forget that you're going to be the one going. And so ultimately you're the one who should have that final kind of stamp of approval saying, yeah, I make the right decision with what I know in the moment. And knowing that can change. You have to, but it can. And not being scared of that. It's a lot, I know, but that's kind of the whole thing. That's what I would say.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one more thing. When Shaan, you brought up like sort of these conversations, what I learned, I think my biggest takeaway in first year is like the importance of networking and mentorship. So I think especially as a student, you really have this huge advantage, like as a title being a student. So naturally, if you go out, you ask people in the field, you ask alumni who went to your university about like advice. Hey, do you have a few minutes? Can I talk to you about how you feel about this, or your career path? How did you get to where you are? you have a huge advantage as a student being a student. Just that title in of itself, it makes other people kind of want to help you. So I think really it's important before you make this decision to go out sort of maybe on LinkedIn, or you can email someone, right? Hey, do you have a few minutes? I would love to talk to you about this. And I think those conversations are so important and valuable, as Shaan said. So really try to go out and make those connections. If you're watching this recording, you could reach out to me anywhere and ask me those questions. But yeah, I think really having those meaningful conversations are really critical.
Yeah, I'll second that. Always happy to help.
Yeah, that's some really great advice to kind of end things on. I just want to say thank you again for both of you. Thank you so much for just being here, giving some really amazing advice and kind of tips and insight into both of your fields, and just kind of your overall journey in general within humanities. I know it's been super helpful for me, so hopefully everybody watching this has learned a lot as well. But yeah, thank you so much. I'm gonna stop the recording right now. Okay.